We have an expert now joining us, Dubey, Partner, Head Aerospace and Defence at KPMG India, to analyse it further. Thank you very much for joining us here. So far, we just have the initial details as far as the Cabinet approval to this civil aviation policy is concerned. Your key takeaways firstly.
Yeah, thanks, Hina, for having me. I think it's a red letter day for Indian aviation. For 70 years since independence, we've never had a policy framework. So most of the time, most of the decisions were based on individual whims and fancies, based on the thought process of the government in power and those who could influence it. But now we have a written down policy, and it covers, I guess, about 20 to 22 different reform areas of the entire aviation spectrum. So I think this is very positive. 5/20 is something which has been an overhyped issue. Frankly, at KPMG, we don't believe that this is such a big issue. But I believe there's been the 5 of the 5/20 has been removed. It's going to be 0/20. But that effectively means 3 or 4/20, because no airline can overnight bring in 20 aircraft. So you'll have to wait for 3 to 4 years. But overall, I guess the biggest takeaway for us is this clear vision that the ministry set about, that we are going to look at a massive growth. This will be both from India to international and also within India. So regional connectivity and global connectivity both have been given a fillip through various subsidy schemes, and also on the international side by making ease of business and removing some of the useless restrictions that has artificially held back the sector. Of course, we'll need much more details when the briefing happens. I guess it's at 3 p.m. today, and after that we'll know further details. Hina?
Right. So subsidy part we'll discuss a little later, but before that, talking about this crucial 5/20 rule, you're saying that even if this has been replaced by 0/20, which means number of years has been replaced, but 20 aircraft is something that the carrier will have to, an airline will have to have. That's going to take time. So it doesn't really make sense to even replace it. Either they should have scrapped it or they should have probably tweaked it in a better way.
Yeah, right, absolutely, Hina. For the last 8 years as KPMG, we've been opposing this law. It is unique to India. It's anti-competition, is all oligopolistic. I mean, you can name, can go on and on about how wrong this policy is. It also showcases that once you bring in a bad cabinet decision, this was in 2004, it's taken 12 years of unending debate and newsprint being devoted to it to finally scrap it. So it's been scrapped in part. And as I just mentioned, it will still take at least about 3 to 4 years for any airline to bring in 20 aircraft. It's not an easy matter. So effectively 5/20 now becomes 3/20. So in principle, while we're saying that yes, it's a bad law, so it has to be changed, but on the ground, it's not been relaxed to the extent we would have liked it to. We would have preferred a complete scrapping of this rule.
Right. And talking about the subsidy that the government will be considering, capping the fares for 1-hour flights, for 30-minute flights, do you think that's going to probably disrupt this entire mechanism that is there in place? And how do you think it's going to compete with the railway sector then, the kind of investments that are being planned? How will all this work according to you?
No, I think it's a very positive move. It will disrupt, but positively. First of all, let's face it, these are not places which are capital cities of states and coastal cities and so on and so forth. These are middle of nowhere kind of places where we have an airport or an airstrip, but it's not being used. So the airlines, most of the airlines typically go to about 35, 40 or 48 locations, not to the 125 odd airports that Airports Authority has. And on top of that, we have another 300 airstrips which have been existing for forever, from the British times, and state governments with the public sector undertakings, private companies. So there are several such airstrips. And the airlines always had an option to go there. They haven't gone there. So now the government is coming in and saying, hey, let's do business here. You tell me what your costs are. I'm going to tell you what we would like the fare to be, just enough to trigger a sort of a mini revolution here. And whatever is the gap, I'll fill it up through this viability gap funding. So I guess it's a great move forward. It's never been done before. Some of the state governments are doing it, especially in Andhra. We're seeing it happening. And some of the locations in Andhra are now getting direct subsidy, giving direct subsidy to the airlines. So I think it's a very positive move. And your last point was about railways. Railways is a behemoth. It moves the whole of India. Last year they did about 8 odd billion people Now, and last year in aviation, we had just about 81 million travelers. So we're talking about 1%. So even if this 1% becomes 2%, for aviation it's a 100% jump technically. But for railways, frankly, 1% going away to aviation is not going to create any major problem. So I think overall it's a great move, and even smaller places, Mufassal towns, the businessmen and job seekers, they have every right to fly in just half an hour, 1 hour to the state capital or to the national capital and go back by the daytime rather than spending 10 hours in a train going up and down.
Right. Also, Amber, there were reports indicating that, the government may consider putting a 2% levy for viability gap funding to develop these regional airports. We don't have clarity on this one, but do you think that will be another positive move?
Yes, absolutely, Hina, because see here, I guess it's very difficult for the government exchequer to fund these subsidy schemes, because this money has to come from somewhere. It's not going to fall from the heavens. It's not going to grow on the trees. It has to come from somewhere. Now, if the central exchequer, which has various other social sector initiatives to look after on the education, on the Skill India, Digital India, etc., and rural development, there's no way any money is going to flow from the Finance Ministry to the Ministry of Civil Aviation. So this money had to be generated within the sector. And that's why I guess the ministry has come up with this idea that we levy a 2% cess on all the tickets sold on the trunk routes and on the international routes. And that 2% will add up to something like, say, 1,200 to 1,500 crores. And that is more than enough to subsidize the connectivity to these remote and regional locations and bring them into the national air grid. So I guess it's a positive move, and frankly 2% makes no difference. In the same aircraft, you'll have people like on a Delhi-Mumbai flight, somebody would have bought the ticket at 2,000 rupees, somebody would have bought it at 10,000 rupees. So in the same aircraft on the same day for the same service, the gap is between 2,000 and 10,000. 2%, even at the highest end of 10,000 rupees, 2% is just 200 rupees. Frankly, doesn't make any major difference to the public. And ultimately, all this money is going from one airline to the other. So you take it from passengers who are on the trunk routes, you take that money and you put it back into the system. So it's money taken from airlines and going back to the airlines which serve those remote locations. So I guess it's a very positive move. Hina?
Last question, as far as the FDI is concerned, the cabinet sources, of course, are indicating that they have scrapped that proposal as well, not increasing FDI to 74%. Do you think that's a negative?
Yes, Hina, that's a negative. We were hoping for an FDI reform here, but we're not that disappointed, because we believe many of these FDI decisions, especially in the last 2 to 4 years, have happened outside policies also. That can be a decision which the cabinet may take outside the policy. So disappointed partly, yes, but not lost hope completely. Also because FDI is something which brings in foreign capital, best practices into the Indian aviation sector. If we have to meet our vision of being number 3 by 2020 and ultimately number 1 by 2030, it's a little laughable, silly dream. But then, as they say, if the dreams are not silly and laughable, it's not a dream. So if we have to achieve that, we need the best airlines in the world to come and participate and compete in the Indian aviation sector. And if this is a way to block competition, it's not going to work, because foreign airlines, even within the current laws, can come in and always set up a 49% subsidiary like AirAsia and Vistara have done. You can also come in and take a minority stake like Etihad has done in case of Jet, and you can still participate in the Indian aviation. So frankly, that is not a method to keep out competition. Right. Lastly, many people raise the bogey of national security. That could be a biggest joke, because if in aviation, if in telecom and banking, which are very, very sensitive to national security, if there you can allow 74 and 100% FDI, I wonder why in airlines we have to play them like a holy cow. Even in other parts of aviation, whether it's airports, MRO, cargo, ground handling, you allow a majority stake to foreign companies. So we just don't understand why airline sector should be treated as a holy cow.
All right, Amber. Thank you very much for joining us here on NDTV Profit and helping us understand the key highlights of this crucial civil aviation policy. Clearly a big day for the entire aviation sector in the country today. Finally, the civil aviation policy has got a clearance from the cabinet.